Off. Hello and welcome, folks. This is Robert McCauley. I'm a solutions architect with the Alexa Skills Kit team. I'm actually currently in Toronto, up high on the 46th floor. Happy to be here today to talk about all the new and cool features of the Alexa Skills Kit for March. We have a very big feature at the end, the dynamic entities feature. We're going to do a nice deep dive with some special guests, so stay tuned for that. And I'm also following the chat, so I'm not going to take too many questions during the call, but let me know if there's any problems or technical issues or anything urgent that I need to address. All right, we're starting. Let's see what we're going to cover today. So all the features I'm going to talk about today, they're listed on our features roundup page, which you can find at alexa.design/features. Go ahead and look at that, bookmark that page. You can come back as often as you like, and you'll see a summary of the new features for the Alexa Skills Kit and links to either the blog post and or the documentation that surrounds that. So what I want to do is just give you a high-level overview of what some of those features are and give you a preview, and then you can go ahead and read the full details and try it out in your own skills as well. Please follow me at Rob McCauley if you like, as well. All right, so the major features we've covered for this month. First one is Alexa for Business Blueprints. Pretty exciting. Blueprints, of course, are a way for anyone, not a developer, but really anyone to create Alexa skills very quickly and easily using a standard template. We've had this for a while at blueprints.amazon.com for creating, fun skills for your home, for your kids. But now we have the ability to create skills for your office, for your company, as we'll see, and publish those and share them within the Alexa for Business framework. Also tied to Alexa for Business is some new integrations to announce that are there or coming using the room booking API. And if you're interested in working further, you can learn how key partners are doing this today. We're going to touch on versioning. We have new features with the Ask CLI and SMAPI service that lets you look at the version of your interaction model. There's even a flag for Alexa Automotive. And if you're not sure what this is, I have this handy little device. This is the Alexa Automotive device. It's coming soon to a store near you, if not already, but very exciting. And we have ways you as a skill developer could detect whether somebody is using your skill from an automotive device or not. We also have a brand new version of the Alexa Design Guide. If you've used this before, you've always found it at alexa.design/guide. Some of the features you'll see, we're really focusing on the core aspects of voice design, being adaptable, personal, available, and relatable. All right, so let's jump into these. Oh, and of course, how can I forget dynamic entities? Stay tuned. In a few minutes, we'll hear from our special guests. We'll do a deep dive on dynamic entities, which are ability to create custom slots, as we'll learn. Okay, Alexa for Business Blueprints. So if you go to blueprints.amazon.com/A4B, or just blueprints regular, you'll see a list of dozens and dozens of cool blueprints you can create to start your skill off with no code or no fuss. And if you scroll down to the bottom, you'll see a couple of new ones that are really geared towards companies. Things like information about your company, frequently asked questions about your company. Let's give it a try, shall we? Here's my browser. I'm just going to go to blueprints.amazon.com. And now you can see some of the traditional ones, the pet sitter, the chore chart, how many days until something. Right, but at the very bottom is these two, Business Q&A and Onboard Guide. So these ones, we'll try the Business Q&A one. The Onboard Guide would be a nice one for new members of the team to get up to speed on all the lingo and the unique parts about your company. But super easy to create a blueprint skill, as we'll see. This one, you see it's a sample. You can even play a little sample of what it might look like. Open Office Helper. What are the hours for IT? Who handles social media campaigns? and boom. So you can click make your own, and you see it's already filled out for you. Who handles social media campaigns? Maybe we're a marketing company. And you can just very easily customize it. What are the hours for IT in the main building, right? So it's customized. So essentially answer some questions, provide some responses, give your skill a name, give it exit message, background theme in case they're coming to a screen device, and create your skill. Now, it'll take a little while to create. It's a special flavor of the skill that you'll see. It'll create the skill itself. It'll also provide us with something called an ARN, an Amazon resource name. And this is key because Alexa for Business is a little different than normal skill building. The final step we'll do, once the skill is there, we'll get that ARN, so it'll uniquely identify the new skill we have. And it won't be public. It won't really work in our company yet until we go ahead and go back to the A4B console, or perhaps send this to our IT administrator, who's the Alexa for Business administrator, and they'll go ahead and add the permissions to this skill. And they have a lot of control over things like which Echo devices the skill will be available on or not, which users will be allowed to use it, what hours they'll be allowed to use it, and things like that. So they say it takes some time, like 10 or 20 minutes, to get the skill fully built and integrated like that, but that's a quick overview of it. If you want to learn more, go ahead to the Alexa Design/features, and you'll see the link to the announcement and all the rest of the details. All right, next up, Room Booking API. So there's been some announcements about future and current integrations with third-party companies that are really experts in the space of managing meetings, doing all the video conferencing, scheduling, and collaboration tools that go along with meetings. So there's a Poly integration that's coming very soon, and then there's existing integrations with a company called Joan and another one called Robin. They all sound like very friendly assistants in their own right to help you with your room needs. So you can learn more about that. If you're interested in doing something like that with your own room booking service, perhaps, you can learn about that as well through the documentation link. You'll need to set up account linking. It's one of the core requirements for this type of skill with Alexa for Business. Interaction model versioning. So there's been a little bit of a tweak to the way the command line interface or the SMAPI interface works for developers to go ahead and look at the metadata of their skills. So you can now request and work with skills models by defining a model version. Typically that would either be development or live. So what I can imagine people doing is creating some sort of a DevOps workflow where you might go in and download the development copy of your interaction model, maybe download the live version, store those in a source control system, maybe once a day. As those change or get overwritten, you would have a way to go back in time and replace maybe the dev version of your interaction model, especially for large team-based environments where it's very important to track what the old state was in case something goes wrong. So take a look at that feature there. You'll see that now in the SMAPI and CLI. Automotive context. So as I mentioned, if you have an Echo Auto device, then you'll be able to see a new flag, a new part of the JSON requests, right? As skill developers, the main thing we do is we process and handle requests from the Alexa service, the big JSON object. Inside there, under the context node, you'll see a new automotive element, and that'll be a Boolean. It'll either be true or false. And if it's true, then maybe you want to have special logic in your skill to not show anything on the screen, for example, not throw any cards or try to distract the user with a lot of information. Just recognize that they're in a car, but maybe ask them questions about whatever, the car experience, where are you going, etc. Pretty simple and straightforward there. All right, now we mentioned the alexa.design/guide, the new version of the guide. Please do check it out. Our team has put a lot of work and effort into revamping the Alexa design guide, which is probably about a year old at this point. So there's a new, improved version there. There's a lot of great tips and feedback. There's things that we've learned working with you, the skill developers, working with agencies and consulting companies who are building skills for clients, and just working internally with what we've seen works well with voice. How to make your skill adaptable, personable, and so forth. No slide for that, but you saw that earlier. All right, so the moment we've been waiting for, dynamic entities. So I work in the Boston office in Cambridge, and I'm privileged to work nearby some of the engineers and the research scientists that build entity resolution some time ago. The idea of having synonyms for slot values, right? Instead of saying Boston, you might say Beantown, right? Instead of saying Logan International Airport, you might just say the Boston Airport. And the power of these synonyms is really great because it lets people speak in their own way, and it maps to the canonical values, as we call them. You'll see in the discussion that we talk about catalogs. Catalog is really just the list of slot values. And we'll see some really clever ways, I think, for how we can personalize the skill, but also personalize the ear of Alexa for each individual user and turn by turn, so that Alexa is always listening a little bit differently and more accurately, depending on what state you're in the skill. Okay, so let's bring up our segment. We have some special guests to join us. Okay, for the next segment, we're going to talk about dynamic entities. And to set the stage, I'm here with Farnaz from the engineering team. Just to set the stage a little bit, we have in the past introduced features for skill developers to add personalization to skills. For example, you can use the Ask SDK and tie in persistent attributes using DynamoDB. We also have a feature for localization where you can get the permission to get the person's location. And we'll find out soon how we can tie these in with this new dynamic entities feature to great effect.
Yeah, so thanks guys. So thanks Rob for having us in the monthly webinar. We are very excited to be here to talk about dynamic entities. So we launched this dynamic entities out of customers' direct requests, right? They went to the voice of the customer, they told us what they want, and it took us a while to figure out what is the right solution for developers, but we really think that it's worth the work, and we hope that the developers agree with us. So from the data, we can see the top mostly used skills are the skills that get the customers get back to them in routinely, right? In a daily basis or in a weekly basis. And as you were mentioning, personalization plays a very big role in it. With dynamic entities, what we are offering is personalization quickly, like updating your catalogs quickly, being able to upload dynamic catalogs into the memory at runtime as customers are changing their behavior or asking for different things. So imagine if you are, like one of the use cases that we keep using is, for example, okay, so let's talk about, sorry.
So when you say catalog, you're talking about slots, right? A list of slot values?
Yes, exactly. The database and list of slot values.
So it could be things like the built-in slots like numbers or states, or you could have custom slots where you have favorite ice cream flavors, for example, like strawberry, chocolate, and vanilla. Right?
Yeah. So so we think about like creating a skill that address customer issues is very important, right? But making it that with Alexa there is a different and an extra level of complexity, right? You need because people are expecting Alexa to treat them as a human because you talk to them. They think Alexa is a friend, is an assistant. So when you tell a friend something, when you ask them to order something from a menu, they won't make a mistake. Like if you are asking a friend to order chicken masala from an Italian restaurant, they probably know you're making a mistake and you're asking for chicken marsala instead, right? Or if you're, if you're asking for a friend to, hey, let's go to, tell me where I can buy this shopping, like this bag, this purse, they don't ask you where you are, right? They know where you are, and then as you change your location, they get to find where you are, and then find and have the favorite places for you, so they don't go and recommend a place that is too far for you, or it was in your list of favorites but it's not anymore.
Interesting. So it sounds like for each person, depending on the city they live in, they might have a different set of local restaurants,
Yes.
And the skill would need to be able to hear those as they change user to user.
Yeah, let's say, for example, a store was my favorite before and I had a bad experience. I said, no, not anymore. Like, take this. Alexa, remember, I don't like this store anymore. They don't have to wait for the static catalog to change, right? My personal static catalog. They can use, they can update that dynamic catalog per customer using dynamic entities. And the good thing about dynamic entities is like it enables all these set of new use cases for the developers.
Oh my gosh, I think there's developers out there that'll be excited for this.
Yes, we are hoping so. And actually, we have a surprise. We have Emily, who is the lead engineer on the feature here joining us from Boston, and can tell us more about it.
Hello, Emily.
Hi, thank you so much, Farnaz and Rob, for that introduction. So I'm Emily Green, and I'm one of the Alexa developers who works on this feature, as Farnaz mentioned. And I'm going to show you how to add dynamic entities into your skill, different ways you can leverage this feature, and the specifics of how it works. So I work in entity resolution, and the purpose of entity resolution is really that there's many ways to say the same thing. This is one of the major challenges that Alexa has and that skill developers have, is that the Alexa end users may say the same thing in a lot of different ways, and we don't necessarily know how to predict that. So we want Alexa to be as smart about the user situation as possible. So we don't only want her to know that Seattle-Tacoma International Airport can be called SeaTac, or I just want to say, book me a flight to Seattle, and that is the only airport that I'm probably referring to. I want to be able to say, book me a flight home. I know where where my family lives, and if I had a travel agent that I work with a lot, and then I would want them to know that too. So if Alexa's going to be my true personal assistant, I want her to know where's home, and can you book me a flight there? So just to review a little bit, I know you're probably all pretty experienced with this page right here, which is the developer console. And I just wanted to review a little bit about static entities and what we're actually doing here with dynamic entities. So for static entities, you define a slot type. Here we're extending a built-in slot type of Amazon.airport, and you would define different slot values that encompass a catalog. So when I talk about catalog, I'm talking about the set of slot values that you have defined for a specific slot type. And the challenge that we face with static entities is that they're defined at build time. They're defined when you click that build model button in the developer console, and you're not able to change those until you have to get your skill through recertification again and back out into customers' hands. So one of the major uses for dynamic entities is to actually extend any of those slot types that you define in your interaction model. Be them custom slot types or extended built-ins, you can extend them further with dynamic entities. So one use case that Farnaz and Rod have already mentioned is how to use dynamic entities for personalization. I actually have an example conversation to walk you through. So when the user says, Alexa, open flight booker, and they ask where you want to go, and they say, book me a flight home, they know a few things already about you. They know that I'm currently located in Boston because of the hook in with the localization API, and they know that home for me is Seattle. So they know that I want to flight from Boston to Seattle, and because I've used Flightbooker online and I've used Flightbooker before, they know that I'm a JetBlue member. So they only identified flights to Seattle that are flown by JetBlue, and they gave me a few options. So there's an 11 a.m. flight, number, I think that says 67. There's 184 at 2 p.m., and then number 416 at 9 p.m. And I'm a little lazy. I couldn't really remember the full length of all of those flight numbers, but I was just like, flight 400, the one in the 400s. And Alexa knew that that could only be flight 416 because she only gave me 3 options, and that's the only one with 400 in it. So she was able to book on the spot the flight 416 today at 9 p.m. without having to ask for more confirmation, without accidentally getting it confused with a Delta flight in the 400s, and without getting it confused by saying there is no flight 400. So dynamic entities are able to match every interaction more specifically.
Very good.
So how am I actually going to load this all up? That's in your Lambda. So unlike static entities that are defined in your interaction model via the developer console, everything in dynamic entities lives in your Lambda. And it's like other directives. So if you've used a directive before, then you are very familiar with this. But basically, a directive is a way for you to send additional information on a given request. It's like you're directing Alexa to do something. So in this directive, it's a dialogue directive. And what you're trying to do is update the list of dynamic entities for that given skill interaction. So you update that list of dynamic entities on an intent request, and those dynamic entities can then be used on all following utterances in that skill session. And so for here, we want to actually dynamically upload Seattle as my customer, as my user ID. It has a synonym of home, and back to Seattle and SeaTac. So you can see what users typically are using and upload the values and synonyms here. You can also upload them on every turn to be different. So on that first turn in my example, we're uploading the different airports that I might be flying to. And on that second turn, we're going to be uploading the 3 different flights that I have to choose from. So you can continuously upload and replace dynamic entities with what you're expecting the user to ask about in the following turn of your conversation. So Alexa can respond as the conversation goes on, and your skill can adapt to what the customer is asking for. So as the state changes, the dynamic entities can change. If suddenly something is out of stock, then you will no longer be able to match to that dynamic entity. Or if you suddenly have a flash sale on purple leather pants, that'll be a new dynamic entity that gets uploaded in the middle of a shopping session. So to link this into personalization, we recommend populating dynamic entities from a database. And you can use some of the tools that Rob already mentioned to link with your DynamoDB table, or you can link to any DynamoDB table or other API gateway or database, however you want to do it. So here is an example of how you would populate it from the DynamoDB database. So in my DB table, the key is the user ID, and user IDs are returned on every request from Alexa. So you'll know when you get the request in, you'll see, okay, this is the user ID. Let me look up that user ID in my add personalized airports function. And I would then wait to get back all of the results that are linked to my personal ID. And for this database, is a database of all of the airports that I've flown to and any specific nicknames that I, as a customer, have given those airports, be that home, be that work, be that where my friend Emma lives, whatever that may be. So here you can see that we're actually constructing the dynamic entities. Again, we're extending Amazon Airport, and we're filling in all of the results from the airport list, which is that field in the DynamoDB results.
Yeah. What happens if they match a dynamic entity?
Yeah.
Does it work the same as the traditional slot matching and entity resolution?
Yeah, the entity resolution is basically the same for dynamic entities, but there's one major difference, and that is we're returning a new authority source. So if you're used to the resolutions per authority only containing one authority source value, unfortunately, we've completely derailed that plan for you. But there's a reason why we did that. There's a reason why resolutions per authority has been an array from the beginning. We want to be able to give you as much information as possible as developers to make an educated decision in your Lambda. So now we're going to return 2 different authority sources, the dynamic one and the static one. So you can think of your dynamic one as being a more personalized catalog, and that one we tend to recommend is more relevant if you get a dynamic match. But you also have your static catalog to fall back on as a more global catalog if there's no dynamic match, that there'll still be a match to your static catalog. So here we can see a dynamic match to home. It matches to Seattle-Tacoma International Airport. And just like all other ER, we return to you that canonized form, meaning that it's exact slot value that you put in and the exact unique ID that you put in when you load the dynamic entities. And if you go to the next slide, you can see actually what happens on a dynamic no match. So let's say I say book a flight to Dallas. Well, I've never flown to Dallas before, so that's not in my dynamic catalog, but it is in the global catalog of all of the places that JetBlue flies to, or all the places that Flight Booker can book a flight to. So here you can see in the resolutions per authority array, the ER success no match for the dynamic case and an ER success match for the global catalog. And you can actually use ER success no matches in the dynamic case to make Alexa smarter. So you'll know that my user ID asked for Dallas. Next time you should include Dallas in my dynamic entities, because maybe I started a new work project that's based in Dallas and I'll be flying back and forth a lot. So you can actually use ER success no match to improve your interaction model on the fly with dynamic entities. One thing that dynamic entities does, besides returning two different authority sources back to you in any order, dynamic can come first, static can come first, we also do ASR and NLU biasing. So ASR is the speech recognition side of Alexa. And what we do is we input the dynamic entities into ASR at runtime. So on all following utterances, ASR will bias towards recognizing words that you included in your dynamic entities catalog. So for example, if we're uploading different Arctic creatures and Antarctic creatures of polar bear orcas and emperor penguins, if I said without dynamic entities, polar, ASR will probably transcribe that as pol space R. And that's not what I'm looking for. But with dynamic entities, it'll hear polar and it'll be like, oh, well, we're biasing towards polar for polar bears, so she probably just pronounced polar wrong. And it'll use polar instead. And that will be able to propagate downstream so that entity resolution can then match polar to polar bear. On the NLU biasing side, it's a little bit more complex. NLU is the natural language understanding, and there's a few pieces of that. The first one is your intent classification, so determining which intent we're actually going to be sending back to your skill. And the intent classification will also be biased by the dynamic entities that you upload, because if you're only uploading dynamic entities to the add item intent, then you're much more likely to have the add item intent match on your following turns. And the reason for that is that if I, as a user, mention a dynamic entity within my utterance, then the entity recognition, which is actually recognizing that that word is a key word that we want to return back to the developer, we preference dynamic custom values over all other possible values. So if there's a dynamic custom value, we'll recognize that entity and we'll choose that intent. There's a hierarchy of entity recognition. We're most likely to bias towards dynamic custom values. So if you're defining your own slot type, any slot values within that slot type. Then we would bias towards dynamic extended built-in. So if you're extending a built-in in your static catalog and you want to extend it further in your dynamic catalog, we'll bias towards that next, and then we'll bias towards your static custom value and your static built-in. So the idea is that you're uploading dynamic entities for a reason. You want this ASR and NLU biasing to happen because you want to increase accuracy on intent classification and entity recognition, which is why we bias NLU so strongly towards those dynamic entities before falling back to the static catalog if there are no dynamic entities. So there's a few different ways that you can use dynamic entities. I showed you a few examples in the conversation earlier. One of them being personalization and being able to link a set of entities to a specific user ID. One of them being localization, knowing based on the location API where I'm located, so I know that where my flight origin is. You can also use localization to change the offerings of your skill. So if you only have certain things that are offered in stores in Seattle versus stores in Dallas or stores in New York, you can upload those dynamic entities accordingly. And that would also work if you only have things offered in certain regions or locales. So if you have something offered in the US, then you would upload a specific set of dynamic entities when you're creating your ENUS skill, and you have a different set for your ENCA skill. And while you can currently do that with your static catalog, this one will change dynamically. So if suddenly Canada, your Canadian stores are allowed to sell something that you're selling in your American stores, you can dynamically add them to your ENCA dynamic catalog. It also works really well for any sort of temporary offers. The great example is a menu of the day. You wouldn't want to and really couldn't be able to recertify your skill every day to add a new menu item for your menu of the day. This eliminates that by allowing you to dynamically upload, if you're suddenly offering the unicorn frappuccino to your skill, and have customers be able to match against those things and order things that aren't typically part of your static catalog. That also works for quiz games, as quiz questions change every day, and the answers are only going to be some set of answers, and it works for any other kind of type of temporary situation, whether you currently have a sale or prices have changed.
I can think of like a case like a chat room even. Like if you look at a chat room, like people come and go like every second, it seems like. So if you're saying, find my friend Chris, maybe it's Chris was spelled differently than a different Chris with a K, for example, because the dynamic entities, is reflecting the exact current state of that list, right?
Yeah, exactly. So if you just added a new friend to your friend list, the dynamic entities will upload, but also if there's only 3 people online right now, then it'll be more likely that you want to talk to the Chris that's currently online, not the Chris that's been offline for 3 days.
Very cool. Yeah, it sounds like you've created a very powerful feature that we don't even know what we're going to be using it for, and there'll be a lot of opportunities to build these kind of really robust skills using this. So I'm excited. I hope everyone else is.
Yeah.
Can't wait to see people using it and hear about all the different possible use cases.
Yeah, let us know. We you can certainly tweet at me, at Rob McCauley, and we also are taking feedback from user voice. I think this was one of the top user voice requests.
Yeah. So Robert, I was thinking maybe. So we are listening to Voice of the Customer website. What is it? Voice of Developer.
Yeah, Alexa.uservoice.com.
This is actually my go-to place. So we are listening, guys. If you have any questions, if you're looking for a feature, don't take it lightly. Just put it there. And this feature actually closed out a couple of requests. It came directly from you developers, and we would love to hear from you more.
That's right.
So thank you, Rob, for having us. That's awesome.
Thank you so much, Farnaz and Emily. It's great to see this feature released, and we're super excited. And let us know what you build. Thanks again.
Awesome. Thanks.
Great. Thanks so much, Rob.
Bye, guys.
Bye. Hello, welcome back. Oh, sorry about that. I was muted. Yep, so we're back. Thank you so much, Farnaz and Emily. Great chat. Yeah, the limit is 100 dynamic slot values or catalog values. Also, to learn more about dynamic entities, my colleague Justin Jeffress has published a great blog post going into detail about how this would work. He's got an example of ordering tea and coffee and getting the variations of what products are available and matching those correctly. So check that out. He's also known on Twitter as Sleepy Developer, but you can learn more about it from him there. All right, that wraps up the monthly summary for March. Again, all the links and the feature details are at alexa.design/features. Follow me on Twitter, Rob McCauley. Follow the team in general, Alexa Devs. Thanks so much for tuning in, and hope to see you again another time. Keep building.